Hello, my friend.
Hey,
Thank you for joining us again.
thank you for having me again.
Of course. So, for those of you who haven't seen Nicole on my channel yet, she is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm going to have her just briefly talk about what she does because she's amazing and she holds different certifications. So, Nicole.
Hey guys, nice to see you. Hope you're doing well during these kind of chaotic times. I've been here supporting my clients the best I can via telehealth, so it's nice to have that outlet to continue therapy with people. And yeah, one of the main topics right now is supporting clients and people and individuals and families and couples through all this chaos and how to really keep some sanity at home. My credentials, so licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in working with couples, specifically couples transitioning to parenthood and couples who are just going through all different types of transitions in their relationships, from premarital to later in their marriage and life transitions. And they also work with individuals, younger adults, in just living a life that reflects their values and goals and the best version of themselves. So that can definitely apply to, I think, all of us, and especially what that best version of ourselves looks like today in quarantine, because I think some of us are stretching ourselves to find that and what that means today. So
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. And we are in interesting times, obviously, with this shelter in place. Nicole and I are both in California. And so we've been home with the kids. And as a lot of you have probably experienced, your daily routines are disrupted. And some of you are looking at your 401ks and your retirement and everything else. And it's just this wild, wild time. And Nicole had this really great post on her Instagram account yesterday, and it just really spoke about how it's okay to feel however you're feeling. I know we see different social media posts about doom and gloom, and then others that are like, well, let's all stay positive, it's all good. And it can be hard to navigate those two extremes, especially when we're probably feeling both sides of that, multiple times throughout the day. So I just thought it'd be great, Nicole, if you could help us maybe break down some tips in terms of how we maintain our mental health during these times when we are experiencing so many different emotions, and help us make sense of.
yeah, definitely. So I think the number one thing I'm sharing with clients is that it's okay to feel however you're feeling. So acknowledge those feelings, sit with them. None of us like to sit in the discomfort of anxiety or grief or worry or pain. It's not a fun place to be. And so we all try to avoid it, or we judge ourselves for it. So a lot of the avoidance that you might see today is, examples are binge watching Netflix, or eating sweets and drinking more, or sleeping extra if you don't have kids. Really trying to avoid and numb those feelings. And while it might get you through the short term, long term is you're really just suppressing them and pushing them down. They'll pop up when you least expect it. So numbing and avoiding is not what we want to do. We want to acknowledge our feelings, sit with the grief, the anxiety, the worry, the frustration of being stuck at home. But then we really want to not just sit with them, but accept those tough feelings. So that's the biggest thing, because when we start to judge ourselves, or shame ourselves for not showing up perfectly and not showing up how maybe we see other families or individuals showing up on Instagram, and a lot of people are posting music videos with their families, and all these fun activities they're doing at home. And it's like, shoot, like I've been sitting on my couch all day letting my kids watch TV. So then we start to shame ourselves, and it's this whole cycle. So it's really of slowing that down.
I love that. Yeah, it's true. I mean, and I feel like it's relevant to any other time in our lives, especially if you consume too much social media. You're going to see people who are quote unquote doing more than you, or quote unquote handling a situation better than you. And so it's easy to get into that shame cycle. So that's true. It's just not doing that to yourself, and really just giving yourself some grace and some space to experience this, because this is new for all of us. This is uncharted territory. And I think we have to remind ourselves of that.
Yes, yes. There's no perfect way to handle a pandemic gracefully. Like
Right.
there's not a rule book for that. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Brene Brown. She has a documentary on Netflix. She has TED Talks, and she talks about vulnerability and showing up and showing up with courage. And she says that she reminds us that in the midst of being scared, sweaty, heart beating, nervous, we can continue to show up for our lives, goals, and families. But showing up should be our goal. The goal is not to show up perfectly.
I
Um,
love that.
so just remembering that
Yeah.
that's tough. That's really a tough one. That's really a tough one, and it's an important lesson, especially if you have kiddos at home and your spouse or your partner, to remind them that they don't have to be perfect every hour of every day. These kids, like, they have an emotional roller coaster, as we know. But oftentimes we try to control that and suppress it for them. It's like, no, calm down, no, go in your room, and if you're crying, go in your room, take a break, take a time out, which is good, but oftentimes the words we use around it is not accepting their emotions. We do kind
Yeah.
of shame, or we do kind of try to stop them short. So we have to practice what we preach and allow ourselves to experience our own emotions and sit with them, and then allow our kids to do that too, even
I
though it
love
might
that.
knock us up the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, especially talking just about control in general, because it all ties back into this subject where it's like so much of this we have zero control over. And so if we focus on what we can control, I think it makes such a big difference. We can control how much news a day we
Yeah.
consume. We can control how many times we check the stock market. We can control the people we follow in our social media, and if it's someone who makes us feel good or brings us joy, then great, more of that. If it's someone who makes us feel less than, or that we're not doing enough, like delete, unfollow, so just being really intentional about the things that you can control. You can make your bed, you can light a candle, you can do these little intentional things that can move you from feeling blah to feeling hopeful, or joyful or grateful for what is here right now.
Right. Another tip around that too is, right now and always, but right now especially, we have so much in our heads. There's so much going on that we take in, there's all these tips online. People are posting all these positive things. We take it in, we process it, and some of it sticks and some of it doesn't, right? It's important, really important, to write things down so you have a visual. So you're talking about control, what we can and what we can't control, which is so important right now. But write it down, have a list. So when you're, going into the fridge, when you're, brushing your teeth at night, you're looking at this list and actually seeing how you can take positive action the next day or even in that moment.
That's good.
Because when you're feeling stressed and when that anxiety kicks in or that depression kicks in, you don't remember those things in the moment. You don't remember the tools. So write it down, have it somewhere, have your kids write it down. Great
Yeah,
activity to do with the family, right?
that's really smart. I like that. That's a very practical tip.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, and looping this, we briefly touched on our children and their emotions, and obviously they're going to be going through some things too, as they've likely been pulled from their daily routine as schools are closed and babysitters and daycare. It's all a mess. And truthfully, we're all spending a lot more time together. So you and your partner, you and your kids, and everybody is on their own journey to trying to make sense of what's happening around them, and they're all on their journey to adapting, and we're all experiencing emotion. So it can be a recipe for a really challenging time for a family unit, right? Because while we are struggling with just showing ourselves grace for our own emotions and our own journey, it's really difficult for us to also then show up and have grace for our children and our spouse who are also dealing with their own stuff. So I would love some insight in terms of how to keep the home just peaceful and happy, and remembering to love one another and show grace in these difficult times.
Definitely. So I'm going to give you a little toolbox of a couple things here, because not every tool or coping skill works for everybody. You got to kind of integrate it into your life and see what does work best for you. So number one, I'm going to say that I actually was just talking to a client this morning, is humor. Humor is great, right? Remember that these feelings and everything that's going on, it's not permanent. It'll pass, right? And when we look back on things, we don't want to we want to be able to celebrate, like, you know, all these moments, and humor is a great way to get through the tough times. So that's a really good tool. And however you and your family implement that, whether, you know, I have families looking at memes, or, you know, watching some comedy, or just doing their own comedy show, talent shows. You know, I saw you guys had like a dance party the other night. So however you can implement humor, that's really good. Number two, over communication, even though it seems cumbersome right now, to really communicate with your partner, again, especially if you have kids at home, what your days are going to look like and the time blocks that you need.
Yes.
Be detailed about it, write it down again, have a family schedule for the days so everybody knows loosely what's expected of them. You know, work time, play time, TV time. If those have to shift and move, that's fine. But I know for me personally, if I know I'm home with the kids all day and it's not a work day where my husband or nanny or someone's watching the kids, I need to know what that day is going to look like. Otherwise, the morning just starts out bad. It's like, wow, I have how many hours until I get to put the kids to bed? So planning out that day, blocking it out, it's like, okay, we're going to spend, you know, an hour in the morning just picking up the house, you know, from last night. Then we're going to spend an hour playing outside. Then we're going to spend 2 hours making a fort and dressing up. And then an hour for lunch, hour for nap, and just really planning it out. So it's like, okay, I can get through this. Like we have some options here. And then if things change or you spend more or less time, that's fine. But just kind of having a map and a guideline is really helpful.
Especially for kids during this time where they're not in school or they're outside of their daily routine. And it's something I have to work on because structure is not, it's difficult for me. And Kai will come to me and say, what are we doing today? Okay. And what's after this? And what's after that? And those are all my cues as a parent that like, he would really benefit from a schedule. And so that's something that I'm working on, but kids, a lot of kids thrive off of that structure and that routine. And so especially in these uncertain times, it's a really great thing to do.
There's a great way to get kids involved with that too. You can have them create pictures of different activities. So they draw the picture, you attach a magnet to it, you attach some Velcro, and they create their own calendar. So if Kai or, you know, the kiddos come to you and say, what are we doing? You have them arrange things in the order they want to do things that day, right? You have bath time, food, quiet time, and they arrange it, right? And you create, and that's an hour just creating the schedule for the day, and now we're gone.
Yes.
But yeah, they're creating pictures. You can even work while they're doing it. You know, a lot of things I've done with my kiddos. Well, my older one is, you know, we do parallel working. So I'm working on my computer, you know, writing notes, doing posts, and my daughter is working on her computer, learning her letters and reading. And it's something where my focus, I can, you know, divert to her if she needs me. But again, planning that out. So my expectation during that time is not that I'll have 100% focus, because it's not possible, right? But if I go into it without that mindset, then I get thrown off, and then it's disaster waiting to happen.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. The visual schedules are huge. We use them a lot in OT, especially with kiddos who have autism, because they especially need that structure. But it, like you said, it would benefit most kids. So that's a really great thing. Great activity to do.
Next tip, I have a post coming out. I don't remember when, but you know, we're practicing, if we're going out at all, we're practicing social distancing, right? If we have to go to the grocery store or wherever, practice social distancing at home too. Okay?
Yeah.
We are not meant, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, we're not meant to be with someone 24/7, right? It's going to drive anyone up the wall. Not good for you.
Yeah.
So we all need those breaks where, you know, we create our distance, the kids, you know, partners, spouses, you create that distance and that alone time. And maybe you need it more often right now than you realize. Full disclosure, like I was sitting in my closet in the dark the other day for just some quiet and peace, and I had to create that space for myself, right?
1000%. We're going to get real creative. We'll be underneath the bed soon. The kids will find us in the closet, like in the attic.
The closet door, the closet door. No one knew I was in there. You know, everybody was safe and taken care of, but I really needed just that quiet moment in the middle of the day to get through the next part of the day, and that's okay. So yeah, like you said, be creative about that space and make sure to be intentional about it. Don't let yourself get to your breaking point where you're yelling at your spouse and your kid, and then you go and take that break, right? Take it beforehand.
Yep.
So that kind of brings me to my next, is really paying attention to your emotions and where you're at. So there's some like 6 key tips if you want to write them down, or I don't know, maybe we can post them somehow a little later so they're written down. But 6 key tips to kind of, sitting in those hard emotions, but not just sitting in them, accepting them. Okay. So the first one is turning towards your emotions with acceptance. And the skill in that is you're recognizing also within your body what that emotion is. So maybe if you're feeling anxious, your chest starts to get tight, you get kind of sweaty, you feel this heaviness, your stomach's nauseous. So the first part of recognizing our emotions is how it's affecting our bodies, because that's usually the first trigger that something's off.
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense.
I think that in OT too.
Yeah.
So that's the first one, turning towards those, engaging in how the emotions are affecting us.
Yep.
Again, you can do all these with your kids too. When your kids are sad, what is the physical symbol of that? Are there tears? Are their bodies getting hot when they're angry? Great way to get your kids involved too.
That's great.
So the next tip is to identify and label your emotions. So give it a name, right? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it sadness? Is it loneliness? Give it a name, identify it. It's the whole concept of when you know your enemy and you befriend your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So labeling your emotion. Another thing that helps some people is not just saying I'm feeling anxious or I'm anxious, but noticing the emotion, saying this is anxiety. So you yourself are anxious, but you're separating it from yourself as this is anxiety that I'm experiencing, but anxiety is not me.
Yeah.
And that's just reminding yourself that it's fleeting too, right?
Yes.
You don't have to own this emotion. It's fleeting. It'll pass. But that helps a lot of people, just that really small shift.
Yeah.
Toward it.
Great.
Okay. Next is accepting your emotions. So what does that look like? So that's not denying it. So this is anxiety right now. This is fear. This is what's happening. Let it unfold. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to go sit in your closet with the lights off and cry, do that. If you need to journal, if you need to talk to a friend, whatever you need to do to get through that emotion, but not push it away, not numb it, not watch Netflix, not sleep, but really sit with it. And process it. So acceptance is big.
That makes sense.
And it goes back to showing up, but you don't have to show up perfectly.
That's right.
It's in those imperfections too that you really learn about yourself and what you need and how you can be vulnerable, and then how that vulnerability really encourages others too to like let down their guard and say, oh, it's okay. I just talked to my mom friend and she's in her car crying, and it's okay, right? It's okay. Next is, like I said, realizing the impermanence of your emotions. So they're fleeting right now. I know, we don't know when the quarantine is going to be over. We don't know when we're going to be able to go back to work and start our lives again and have some normalcy, but it will happen, right? So this isn't permanent. It will happen. I think the coolest thing we've seen is a lot of people stepping up right now, right? Stepping up online, having that urgency to really connect, the human connection. I remember, with the fires in Ventura that we had, or even going back as far to 9/11 and some of these things, like we do in these tough times come together as a community.
Yes.
And I love it. And I wish it didn't take the tough times to do that.
Right.
But sometimes it's such a good reminder. Because we get into the habits of our everyday and we get very, focused and goal oriented, and then everything else is outside of this tunnel vision, right? And so it's really important that community is out there and that we need it. We need that community. Something I talk about a lot with my couples and talking about couple relationships in quarantine is that we were never meant to get all of our needs met by one person.
Yeah.
Right? They're not a Walmart. They can't provide us with every single thing that we need in our life. And it wasn't meant to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
In the olden times, we had these communities, whether they were religious communities or just small communities that were built up. And all these different people would provide us all these different things. One person would be a friend. One would be, someone we could talk to about, our sexual relationships. One person would be someone we could talk to about our kids, and we'd have all these different people, and those would make us whole, right? But if your husband or your spouse is your best friend and your lover and your co-parent and your sexual partner and all these things, like it's disaster waiting to happen. It's too much.
Yeah.
So remember that too with community, and that hopefully even once these tough times are over, we can still connect with that community, because that's really important.
So important.
Yep. Next one is inquire and investigate your emotions. So once you start to accept them, keep an eye out for what's triggering you, right? If you're watching a lot of news and you're going to bed at night feeling really anxious and having a hard time sleeping, maybe you need to cut down on that news a little bit. If you are with your kiddos and husband or spouse 24/7 and not taking those breaks and feeling just this like suffocation, pay attention to it, right? Don't ignore those things. So inquire and investigate what's triggering your emotions.
Makes sense.
And the last one, let go of your need to control your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to control them right now. And the biggest misconception, I think, is that, sorry, getting nasally here. The biggest misconception is that our emotions, we judge ourselves for them, we shame ourselves, but all of our emotions are valid. We can't change our emotions. The only thing we can actually change or ever have control of is our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So our thoughts precipitate our emotions, and we can get into that later. It's cognitive behavioral therapy, and one of the things I do a lot in my practice with clients. But it's really controlling your thoughts, because that's what leads to your emotions.
1,000%.
Yeah, so that goes back to the investigating too, is what thoughts, what am I telling myself? And usually we're not aware of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that we really have to slow down to pay attention. But for example, if you're going to bed at night and you're sitting up, anxious, and your heart's pounding, and you're just saying, I'm so anxious, and this is anxiety. Okay, great. But before why are you feeling anxious, right? What was the thought that went through your head? So you slow down and say, maybe the thought is, I don't know how I'm going to pay my mortgage next month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or my husband, isn't showing up for me, and I'm alone, and therefore I feel anxious, right? So remember that, to pay attention to those thoughts too, but you can't control your emotions. So don't try to.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are good. Those
Yeah.
are really good, really helpful. Yeah, we'll definitely, as you watch this, the text will be there, but this is something to go back to too, and like Nicole said, write it down, because it seems like a more powerful thing if you're following the entire sequence instead of just picking one or two things. So yeah, writing that down and having this as a tool in your toolbox that you can revisit when you are feeling off, when you are feeling things are out of your control. So
right.
Thank you for that. That's like, it's nice to have that perspective and to have the, these tools, and just to really remember that we are never alone, it feels different because we are physically distanced, but thank goodness for technology. Thank goodness for community, because we can have these conversations and say, oh, we are absolutely connected. Yeah. A lot of people are going through this, and we will get through this together with the help of amazing professionals like yourself, who are willing to come here and share information and knowledge and just lift the collective energy. So we appreciate you.
Thank you. We appreciate you and just bringing this all together. And yeah, I love seeing how everyone's stepping up right now. It's really
me too. It's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And you guys, if this again is your first time following or seeing Nicole on my channel, I'm going to put all of her social media information and her website in the description box below. Follow her, because she's always providing these really amazing tools that are practical and effective, and just, to me, spark joy. So I'm really happy to have Miss Nicole as a friend, and someone who is always happy to jump on and share her knowledge. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them below, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.
Everyone, guys, take care.